Imagine a winter so harsh that frost doesn't just cover the windows but seeps into your room, chilling the floorboards and even your bed. How would you sleep if your only warmth came from a dying fire and the cozy presence of someone beside you? Sounds tough, right? In the heart of a 13th century English winter, the sun sets early, wrapping the world in silence and shadows. Vibrant summer greens and autumn oranges are buried under white and gray. Nature holds its breath, leaving people to find warmth and comfort by the one place the cold can't touch, the hearth. If you are enjoying our journey into the past, please take a moment to click the like button and subscribe. And I would love to know, as we settle in tonight, where in the world are you listening from, and what is the time on your clock right now? It is always a joy to see our global community gathering together. Now pull up your covers, let the warmth settle around you, and let us travel back to the long night. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. Tonight, we step away from the thermostat and the radiator to uncover the cozy, smoke-filled reality of a medieval winter's rest. The year is 1300. A shift is occurring in the skies above Europe. Historians and climatologists will later call this the onset of the Little Ice Age. But for the villager standing in the doorway of a humble cottage in the north of England, it is simply a cold, unlike any his grandfather remembered. The temperatures have begun to drop significantly. The winters are becoming longer and fiercer. The agricultural calendar, which dictates every rhythm of daily life, has entered what the peasantry calls the dead season. It is a time of dormancy. The earth is frozen, hard as iron. The fields, which teemed with laborers only months ago, are now empty and silent. The approach of the winter solstice marks the shortest day of the year. In the northern reaches of England, the sun struggles to climb above the horizon, offering less than 8 hours of pale, watery light before sinking back into the earth. Darkness is not merely an inconvenience in this world. It is a dominant force. It limits work, it confines movement, and it brings with it a biting chill that seeks out every weakness in clothing and architecture. Preparation for this long siege of cold begins weeks before the first snow falls. The cottage is not just a home, it is a fortress against the frost. The survival of the family depends on the integrity of its walls. As the autumn winds strip the last leaves from the oak trees, the villagers engage in a ritual of repair known as mud and stud. They inspect the exterior of their dwellings with anxious eyes. Every crack in the timber frame and every fissure in the dried mud walls represents a breach where the heat could escape and the deadly frost could enter. To fix these gaps, they mix fresh mud with straw and perhaps a little lime if they are fortunate. They work the mixture with their hands, feeling the grit and the cold, wet earth. They press it deep into the cracks, smoothing it over until the wall is whole again. It is a tactile and messy process, but a vital one. The crunch of frost-hardened mud under their leather boots serves as a constant reminder of what is coming. In the farmyards, another crucial preparation takes place. November brings the feast of St. Martin, known as Martinmas. This is the traditional time for the slaughter of livestock. It is a pragmatic decision born of scarcity. There is simply not enough fodder to keep all the animals alive through the barren months of winter. The cattle and pigs are culled, and their meat is salted or smoked to sustain the family until spring. This period is filled with industry. The smell of rendering animal fat hangs heavy in the air. This fat is not wasted. It is collected and cooled, to make tallow candles. These simple, sputtering lights will be their only defense against the crushing darkness of the winter evenings. As the days shorten, the villagers turn to the riverbanks. They wade into the freezing shallows to harvest rushes. These tall, reed-like plants are cut in great bundles and brought back to the cottage. They are spread out to dry, turning from green to a pale, brittle yellow. Once dried, they are layered thickly on the floors. This is not just for cleanliness. It is a layer of insulation. The cold radiates upward from the ground, and a thick carpet of dried rushes creates a barrier trapping pockets of air and keeping the feet relatively warm. The windows of a peasant cottage are small. Glass is a luxury far beyond their reach, reserved for the high altars of cathedrals or the private chambers of the nobility. Instead, the windows are covered with oiled parchment or heavy wooden shutters. The parchment allows a faint, milky light to filter through, but it offers little view of the outside world. The shutters, when closed, plunge the room into darkness, but they are solid. They block the wind that whistles through the eaves. Draft exclusion is an art form here. Every joint where timber meets timber is a potential entry point for the wind. The villagers gather moss from the forest floor, feeling its damp softness. They dry it and then wedge it tightly into the timber joints. It expands as it settles, sealing the gaps. It is a primitive form of caulking, but effective. The day ends early. The concept of shutting in or closing the day happens as soon as the sun dips below the horizon. There is no staying up late with electric lights. To burn a candle unnecessarily is to burn money and resources. As the twilight fades, the heavy tapestry or rough canvas hanging over the doorway is dropped. This fabric acts as an airlock, preventing the warm air inside from rushing out when the door is opened. The family retreats inside. The visual of breath misting instantly in the twilight air vanishes as they step across the threshold. Outside, the wind begins to howl, whistling through the thatch. Inside, the world shrinks down to the size of a single room. As the cottage is sealed against the wind, we turn our attention to the structure itself. To the modern eye, the peasant home might seem simple or even crude. But in the context of a medieval winter, it is a marvel of engineering designed with a single purpose: to retain heat. Most peasant homes are known as hall houses. They consist of one large open room. There are no hallways to channel cold air. There are no unused rooms to drain warmth. The entire family lives, eats, and sleeps in this single shared space. The structural heart of this building is the cruck frame. This design utilizes massive curved timbers, often taken from a single tree that has been split down the middle. These two halves are joined at the top to form a great arch resembling the letter A, or perhaps the ribs of a giant whale. This arch supports the weight of the roof, carrying the load down to the ground. This design allows the sidewalls to be relatively low. The walls themselves are built using a technique called wattle and daub. It is a method as old as it is effective. Vertical stakes of timber are driven into the ground between the cruck frames. Then flexible hazel sticks are woven horizontally between them, creating a basket-like lattice known as the wattle. This creates the skeleton of the wall. Then comes the daub. This is a mixture of mud, clay, straw, and animal dung. It sounds unappealing to modern sensibilities, but it is a sophisticated composite material. The straw provides tensile strength, preventing cracks. The dung contains enzymes that help the mud harden and bind. The mud provides bulk. This mixture is plastered onto the wattle lattice in thick layers, both inside and out. When it dries, it forms a solid wall that is windproof and remarkably sturdy. But the true genius of the wattle and daub wall lies in its thermal mass. The thick earthen walls have the capacity to absorb heat. During the day, even the weak winter sun warms the exterior surface. Inside, the heat from the fire is absorbed by the walls rather than passing through them. As the temperature drops at night, the walls slowly release this stored heat back into the room. It is a slow, gentle warmth. The distinct earthy scent of the wattle and daub walls becomes the smell of home. It is the scent of the earth itself, raised up to protect its children. Above the walls sits the roof. In a medieval cottage, the roof is not merely a cover, it is a blanket. It is thatched with red or straw, often layered to a thickness of a full foot or more. This thick layer of trapped air is an incredible insulator. It is far superior to the thin slate or clay tiles that will replace it in later centuries. The thatch hangs heavy like a woolen hat pulled down low over the house. The eaves are built low, sometimes nearly touching the ground. This is intentional. By keeping the profile of the house low, the builders allow the wind to flow over the structure rather than pressing against the walls. It deflects the gale. Inside, the ceiling is low. In many places, an adult might have to stoop. This creates a cave-like feeling of security. But more importantly, it reduces the volume of air that needs to be heated. Heat rises, and a high ceiling is a thief of warmth. By keeping the roof space tight, the heat is kept down where the people are. The floor is compacted earth. Over generations of use, it has been stamped down until it is as hard as concrete. Sometimes in the construction phase, the earth was mixed with oxblood, which acts as a binding agent, creating a polished, durable surface. Yet, despite the rushes layered upon it, the floor retains the memory of the ground beneath. A damp cold radiates from it constantly. It is a reminder that the earth is frozen just inches below the surface. Internal partitions are rare. Walls block the flow of heat. By keeping the space open, the warmth from the central fire can reach every corner. The only barriers might be woven screens to separate the sleeping area from the livestock if they are brought indoors. But usually it is one room. The door is the weak point. It is kept small and low. To enter, one must bow almost double. This is not just humility, it is physics. A large door allows a massive exchange of air every time it is opened. A small door minimizes this heat loss. Furthermore, the house is oriented with care. The builders observe the land and the weather patterns. The door is almost always placed on the side of the house facing away from the prevailing wind. When the winter storms blow from the north or west, the door remains on the sheltered leeward side, protected from the direct blast. The darkness of the corners, where the firelight does not reach, is absolute. The thick thatch and the mud walls create a total seal against the light of the moon. It is a womb of darkness, warm and enclosed. Within this shell, one element served as the beating heart of survival: the central hearth. In the modern world, we are accustomed to fireplaces being built against a wall, often with a decorative mantelpiece. But in the medieval Hull house, the fire is primal. It sits in the very center of the room. It is the axis around which life revolves. It is not just for cooking. It is the only source of heat and the only source of light. There are no chimneys in these peasant cottages. A chimney requires bricks and mortar and skilled masonry, which are expensive. Instead, the smoke from the fire rises straight up. It gathers in the roof space, creating a thick haze. It eventually escapes through a simple vent in the roof, or simply filters out through the thatch itself. This might sound suffocating, and indeed the stinging sensation of wood smoke in the eyes is a constant companion of winter. But the smoke serves a purpose. The smoke layer hangs in the roof space, killing insects that might burrow into the thatch. It coats the timbers in soot and tar, preserving them against rot. It hardens the straw. The family learns to live below the smoke line. They sit on low stools. They sleep on low beds. As long as they stay close to the floor, the air is relatively clear. The fire is never allowed to go out completely. Starting a fire with flint and steel on a damp, freezing morning is a difficult and miserable task. Instead, the fire is banked at night. This is a nightly ritual performed with reverence. The head of the household takes a shovel of ash and carefully covers the glowing embers. This deprives the fire of oxygen, slowing the burn right down without extinguishing it. The embers pulse gently in the dark, protected by their blanket of gray ash. In the morning, the ash is raked back, dry kindling is added, and with a few breaths of air, the fire roars back to life. This practice is so universal that it gives rise to a law. In the towns and cities, the danger of fire is great. A bell is rung at night, signaling that all fires must be covered for safety. The French term for cover fire is couvre-feu. This evolves into the English word curfew. But in the isolated cottage, the banking of the fire is not about law, it is about survival. The loss of a fire in winter is a life-threatening emergency. If the embers die, the cold rushes in immediately. The fuel depends on the landscape. In the great forests, wood is plentiful. But in many parts of England, wood is a valuable resource belonging to the lord of the manor. Peasants often have to rely on other fuels. In the moorlands and wetlands, they cut peat and turf. These blocks of compressed earth and vegetable matter are dried in the summer sun. When they burn, they do not flame brightly like wood. Instead, they glow with a mesmerizing orange intensity. They produce a heavy aromatic smoke and a steady, consistent heat. The family gathers around this hearth. Pot hooks and trammels hang from the beams above, holding iron cauldrons over the heat. Cooking and heating are one and the same. The evening entertainment is simple. It is fire gazing. There are no books for most. There is no theater. There is only the shifting landscape of the embers. The sound of a log shifting and cracking in the silence is startlingly loud. The taste of soot lingers in the back of the throat, a flavor that becomes indistinguishable from the taste of food and air. Standing by the fire, one experiences a strange duality. The face and hands are roasted by the intense heat, while the back remains freezing cold. The family rotates, constantly turning like meat on a spit to warm all sides. It is a dance of proximity, finding the perfect distance where the heat is comforting but not scorching. With the fire banked and the red eyes of the embers peering out from the ash, the family prepares the bedding materials. The furniture in a peasant cottage is sparse, and the bed is the most significant piece, but it is not a bed as we know it. The medieval mattress is a lesson in organic chemistry and structural engineering. Most peasants sleep on a pallet. This is essentially a large sack made of rough linen or canvas. It is not filled with feathers or foam. It is filled with straw. Fresh straw is essential. Over time, straw breaks down. It turns to dust. It absorbs moisture. And worst of all, it becomes a breeding ground for fleas and lice. The changing of the straw is a seasonal chore. The old straw is dragged out and burned or used for mulch. The sack is washed and then stuffed with fresh, clean stalks. Rye straw is preferred over wheat straw. Rye stalks are longer, tougher, and more hollow. They do not break as easily and they provide better loft, keeping the sleeper further from the hard ground. In the highland areas where grain is scarce, the mattress might be filled with dried heather or bracken ferns. These materials are springy and resilient, but straw alone attracts insects. To combat this, the medieval sleeper turns to the garden and the hedgerow. They mix fragrant herbs into the straw: dried lavender, wormwood, mint, woodruff. These are not just for their pleasant scent, though the faint smell of dried lavender crushed under. Weight is a comfort in the dark. These herbs contain natural oils that repel fleas and mites. It is a primitive biological defense system built into the bed itself. The bed is rarely placed directly on the floor. The floor is the domain of the cold and the drafts. The mattress is placed on a wooden frame or a settle. This raises the sleeper up away from the chill of the earth, but keeps them low enough to avoid the smoke hanging in the rafters. The construction of the bed frame gives rise to a phrase still used today: the mattress needs support. Solid wooden boards would be uncomfortable and hard. Instead, ropes are woven across the frame in a grid pattern. These ropes support the straw mattress, giving it a bit of spring. Over time, the ropes stretch and sag, causing the bed to become like a hammock. A key tool in the bedroom is a bed key or a simple wooden peg used to tighten these ropes. Before bed, one would pull the ropes taut to ensure a firm, supportive surface. Hence the saying, "Sleep tight." The bedding itself creates a cocoon. The bottom sheet, if there is one, is linen, but the blankets are wool. This is not the soft, refined wool of a modern sweater. It is heavy, coarse, and homespun. It retains the natural lanolin of the sheep, making it slightly water-resistant and incredibly warm. The texture is scratchy against the skin, a constant tactile reminder of the material. It is heavy. The weight of the blankets presses down, pinning the sleeper to the mattress. Pillows are a luxury. Feathers are valuable and often sold. Many peasants rest their heads on a bolster, which is a firm cylinder of fabric stuffed with more straw, or even a smooth log of wood wrapped in cloth. It is hard, but it elevates the head. For the coldest nights, there is one final layer: furs. These are not the ermine and mink of kings. They are the skins of the animals the peasants live with. Sheepskins, with the wool still attached, are incredibly warm. Rabbit skins, sewn together, form soft, dense blankets. The warmth of a sheepskin rug pulled up to the chin creates a microclimate of body heat. The sensory experience of this bed is intense. There is the loud, rustling sound of dry straw with every movement. A turn in the night sounds like walking through dry leaves. There is the scratch of the wool, the smell of the herbs, the hardness of the wooden frame digging into the mattress if the straw is too thin. But as the fire glows dimly and the wind howls outside, this rustic nest is the most comfortable place on earth. But the bedding was only one layer of defense. The true source of heat was far more personal. Before we dive under the covers to see who or what might be joining us in bed, I've got a quick favor to ask. Do you have a favorite historical era or a burning question about daily life in the past that you'd love to see in a future video? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and totally love being inspired by your curiosity. The fire in the hearth is banking down. The embers pulse with a deep and dying red glow. But as the cottage seals itself against the night, another source of heat begins to take effect. This source is not made of timber or peat or coal. It is biological. It is social. It is the heat of the living body. In our modern world, sleep is often a solitary act. We prize our privacy. We have separate bedrooms. We have king-sized beds that allow us to sleep without ever touching our partner if we so choose. We have thermostats that keep the air at a precise 70 degrees regardless of the weather outside. But in the medieval winter, privacy is not a luxury. It is a death sentence. To be alone is to be cold. To be together is to survive. The concept of the bedroom as a private sanctuary simply does not exist for the medieval peasant. The main room of the hall house, which served as the kitchen and the workshop during the day, transforms at night. It becomes a communal dormitory. The bed itself is the centerpiece of this nightly survival strategy. This sleeping platform is often referred to as the Great Bed. It is wide, it is sturdy, and it is designed to accommodate not just a couple, but an entire family. The arrangement of bodies within this bed is not random. It is a hierarchy determined by age and status and vulnerability. It is a puzzle of limbs and warmth solved every single night. The parents take the prime position. They sleep in the middle or at the head of the bed. This is the warmest spot. It is the core of the human radiator. On either side of them, or perhaps curled at their feet, lie the children. The youngest are kept closest to the mother. The older children fill in the gaps. If there are guests or extended family members, like a grandmother or an unmarried uncle, they too are folded into this human pile. The physics of this arrangement are sound. The human body acts as a furnace, constantly radiating heat. By pressing bodies together, the surface area exposed to the cold air is drastically minimized. The heat generated by one person is trapped by the person next to them. Under the heavy woolen blankets, a microclimate is formed. The temperature inside the bed can be significantly higher than the freezing air of the room. It is a pocket of tropical warmth in a landscape of ice. There is a distinct etiquette to this communal sleeping. It is governed by strict social norms. Despite the intimacy of the situation, it is not necessarily sexual. It is pragmatic. The term bedfellow is a common word in the medieval vocabulary. It implies a trusted companion, someone you can share a sleep space with, without fear or awkwardness. However, the reality of sharing a mattress with 4 or 5 other people is not always harmonious. The literature of the time is filled with complaints about bedfellows. There is the snoring, the grinding of teeth, the sudden kick in the shin from a dreaming child. There is the constant battle for the covers. As the night wears on and the fire dies completely, the cold presses in closer. Every movement lets in a draft. A restless sleeper is a nuisance to everyone. One curious custom that arises from this need for shared warmth is known as bundling. In a time when firewood is scarce and private rooms are non-existent, courtship presents a challenge. How do young lovers spend time together without freezing to death? The answer is to put them in bed together. But propriety must be maintained. The young man and woman are allowed to sleep in the same bed, often fully clothed, or with a heavy wooden board placed between them. This separation board acts as a chaperone. It allows them to share body heat and conversation while preventing any physical intimacy that would violate the moral codes of the time. It is a delicate balance between biology and theology. For the traveler, the situation is even more intimate. If a man is journeying during the winter and stops at an inn, he does not rent a room, he rents a space in a bed. It is entirely common for a traveler to pay his penny and climb into a bed with a complete stranger. The innkeeper might direct him to a bed already occupied by two other men. They will nod a greeting shift over to make room and then go to sleep back to back. In this world, body heat is a commodity that can be shared even between strangers. Under the covers, the state of dress varies. But for many, sleeping naked or in a simple linen shift is the standard. This might seem counterintuitive to us. Surely, one would want to wear layers of wool to bed. But the logic of the medieval sleeper is different. Heavy wool clothing traps the cold and can harbor dampness from the day's work. Furthermore, the most efficient transfer of heat is skin to skin. A layer of thick clothing acts as insulation, preventing the warmth of your bedfellow from reaching you. By stripping down, the family creates a unified thermal mass. The sensory experience of this communal sleep is intense. There is the rhythmic sound of multiple people breathing in unison. It creates a collective white noise that fills the silence of the cottage. There is the overpowering stillness of the room, broken only by a shifting sleeper or the rustle of the straw mattress. There is the smell of unwashed bodies, of wood smoke clinging to hair, and of the herbs stuffed into the mattress. In the dark, the sense of touch becomes primary. The feeling of a cold nose against a shoulder, the warmth of a small hand, the sense of safety derived from physical contact is profound. In a world full of dangers, real and imagined, sleeping alone is a terrifying prospect. In the pile there is safety. But humans were not the only ones seeking warmth. Often the livestock were invited inside. In many parts of rural England, particularly in the north and the southwest, the architecture of the peasant home reflects a deep symbiosis with animals. These dwellings are known as lothouses. In a longhouse, the family living quarters and the animal barn or byre are built under a single long roof. There is no separation. There is no going outside to check on the cows. You simply walk to the other end of the room. In the winter, this connection becomes even closer. The animals are brought in from the pasture, the cows, the oxen, the few precious sheep. They are tethered in the byre section of the house. A drainage channel usually separates the human floor from the animal floor, helping to manage the waste. But the air flows freely between the two zones. This is not just about protecting the animals from the cold. It is about the animals protecting the humans. A full-grown cow is a massive biological engine. Through the process of digestion and metabolism, a cow generates an immense amount of body heat. Modern calculations suggest that a cow produces the thermal equivalent of nearly 1,000 watts of heat. Having 3 or 4 cows in the house is like having a large modern radiator running at full blast all night long. The presence of the animals changes the atmosphere of the house entirely. The winter air is naturally dry and harsh. It cracks the skin and irritates the throat. The breath of the animals is warm and moist. It adds humidity to the air, softening the bite of the frost. The deep, resonant lowing of a cow in the middle of the night becomes a comforting sound. It is the sound of capital. It is the sound of wealth. It is also a security measure. Livestock rustling is a common crime. A cow is the most valuable possession a peasant family owns. To lose a cow in winter is a catastrophe. By keeping the animals inside the family ensures that no thief can steal them without waking the entire household. Smaller animals are integrated even more closely. Chickens are susceptible to the frost. Their combs can freeze and fall off. To protect them, they are often brought into the main living area. They are kept in coops, shoved under the great bed, or sometimes perched on the rafters above the heads of the sleeping family. The scratching of chickens in the rafters becomes part of the night sounds. Occasionally, a feather might drift down in the darkness. Pigs are generally hardier and are kept in sties outside. But if a sow farrows, it is not uncommon for a basket of squealing piglets to be brought inside and placed near the hearth. Their survival guarantees meat for the next year. The smell is, of course, unavoidable. The scent of manure and wet fur mixes with the wood smoke and the cooking smells. To the modern nose, it would be overpowering, perhaps even nauseating. But to the medieval peasant, it is the smell of life. It is the smell of a well-stocked home. The ammonia from the animal waste cuts through the air, a sharp chemical tang that never quite leaves the fabric of their clothes. Then there are the pets. Cats and dogs are not just working animals in the winter. They are living hot water bottles. A dog curled behind the knees provides a localized heat that is incredibly effective. A cat sleeping on the chest protects the neck from drafts. The heavy warmth of a dog is a luxury. However, this proximity comes with risks. The line between human and animal is blurred. Fleas do not respect the boundary of the drainage channel. They migrate freely from the cattle to the bedding. Zoonotic diseases can spread in the close confines of the longhouse. But in the calculation of survival, the risk of sickness is weighed against the certainty of freezing. The warmth wins every time. As the morning light begins to filter through the cracks in the shutters, the scene in the longhouse is almost mystical. The air is cold enough that breath is visible. But rising from the animal end of the house is a fog of steam. It rises from the flanks of the cattle and the nostrils of the oxen. It is a visible testament to the heat of life holding back the winter. While the animals wore their winter coats, the humans had to rely on clothing. When the peasant climbs out from the warm pile of the bed, they face the shock of the morning air. The transition is brutal. This is why many do not fully undress. The base layer of medieval clothing is the linen shift or chemise. It is worn by men, women, and children alike. It is a simple T-shaped garment that hangs to the knees or the ankles. During the day, the chemise absorbs sweat and protects the outer wool garments from the body. At night, it becomes pajamas. In the deepest winter, a peasant might wear the same chemise for weeks on end. Taking it off means exposing the skin to the biting air. It is better to stay wrapped in the linen which has taken on the temperature of the body. The most critical piece of nightwear, however, is not for the body, but for the head, the nightcap. It is a piece of medical wisdom passed down through generations, that the head is where the life heat escapes. Modern science confirms that a significant amount of heat is lost through an uncovered head. To sleep without a cap in a freezing room is to invite sickness. The nightcap is usually a simple, close-fitting bonnet made of linen or wool. It is called a coif. It ties tightly under the chin. This creates a seal around the ears and the jaw. It prevents the cold drafts from tickling the neck. For many, the coif is put on in the morning and not taken off until the next washing day. It is a helmet against the elements. The snug feeling of the linen tied tight under the jaw is a constant sensation of containment. For the extremities, stockings are sometimes worn to bed. These are not elasticated socks. They are woven wool cut on the bias to stretch. They are held up by garters. The The friction of the wool stockings against the straw mattress is a dry, scratching sound, but they keep the toes from turning blue. Nightgowns, as we know them, do not really exist for the common people. The idea of a special garment just for sleeping is a frivolity. However, the wealthy might have fur-lined sleeping garments. But for the peasant, the heavy woolen cloak worn during the day serves a double purpose at night. It is thrown over the bed as an extra blanket. There is a desperate ingenuity to keeping warm. People wrap their feet in rags that have been heated near the fire. They use hot stones wrapped in cloth and place them at the foot of the bed. But mostly, they rely on the layers they already own. The reluctance to change clothes leads to a specific problem: lice, the warm, humid environment. Between the skin and the wool is the perfect breeding ground for body lice. They are the constant companions of the poor. The itch is a torment that accompanies the night. In the quiet of the dark, the scratching is a sound as common as breathing. But even the lice are a sign of warmth. They do not live on the freezing dead. Internal heat was just as important as external insulation, fueled by the winter diet. The body is an engine. To produce heat, it must burn fuel. In the winter, the diet of the peasant shifts. It becomes heavier. It becomes denser. It is designed to sit in the stomach and burn, slowly releasing energy over the long, cold night. The staple of this diet is pottage. It is a thick stew that simmers in the cauldron over the central fire all day. It is not a delicate soup. It is a solid mass of boiled grain, usually oats or barley mixed with whatever vegetables are available. In the winter, these are root vegetables: turnips, parsnips, carrots, onions. These vegetables grew underground, and they carry the earthy taste of the soil. Also in the mix are dried peas and beans. These legumes are crucial. They provide protein, but they also make the pottage heavy and hard to digest. This is intentional. The process of digestion is thermogenic. Breaking down heavy fiber and complex carbohydrates generates body heat. A bowl of thick, heavy pottage sits in the stomach like a hot coal, radiating warmth from the inside out. For those who can afford it, there is bacon or salt pork. A chunk of fatty meat added to the pottage provides essential calories. Fat is high-energy fuel. The grease from the bacon coats the lips and provides a barrier against the chapping wind. As the evening closes in, there is a tradition of the bedtime drink. Cold water is unappealing and potentially dangerous. Ale is the standard drink, but in winter it is often served hot. A popular winter drink is the caudle. This is a mixture of warm ale or wine, thickened with egg yolks, and sometimes mixed with breadcrumbs. It is almost a liquid meal. It is rich and frothy. If the family is fortunate, they might add spices. In the medical theory of the time, based on the humors of the body, winter is cold and wet. Therefore, the body needs to be balanced with things that are hot and dry. Spices like ginger, pepper, and cinnamon are classified as hot. Even a pinch of pepper in the ale is seen as a medical intervention to stoke the internal fire. The warming sensation of spiced ale traveling down the chest is an immediate comfort. Eating late is generally discouraged by the church, which preaches against the sin of gluttony. But in the winter, these rules are often bent. A full stomach is a warm stomach. The family gathers around the fire for this last meal. They do not have individual plates. They use trenchers, which are thick slices of stale bread that serve as edible plates. The pottage is ladled onto the bread. The bread soaks up the hot broth, becoming soft and flavorful. When the stew is finished, the trencher itself is eaten or given to the dogs. Treats are simple: roasted apples or pears placed in the ashes of the hearth until they burst their skins. The smell of roasting fruit bubbling in the heat is sweet and promising. The soft, hot pulp is a burst of sugar energy. But over this scene of consumption hangs a shadow: the fear of famine. The winter stores are finite. Every bowl of pottage eaten in December is one less for March. There is a constant mental calculation. Rationing is common. In the late winter known as the hungry gap, the pottage becomes thinner. The bacon disappears. The internal fire burns lower. But for now, in the depth of the freeze, the family eats. The clatter of wooden spoons in the quiet room is a happy sound. The heavy, satisfied feeling in the stomach is the best sedative. It pulls the eyelids down. It prepares the body for the long hibernation of the night. As the peasants settled in their crowded cottages, the nobility faced the cold in a very different setting. Speaking of staying warm, I am curious about your own preferences. If you had to choose, would you prefer a freezing cold room buried under a mountain of heavy blankets, or a warm, heated room with just a light sheet? There is something undeniably cozy about the weight of winter bedding. Let me know your choice in the comments. We leave the huddled warmth of the peasant cottage and the steam-filled air of the longhouse. We travel up the hill. We follow the winding frozen track that leads to the imposing silhouette against the starry sky. The castle. Here in the home of the nobility, one might expect a respite from the biting winter. One might imagine that stone walls, which are so effective at keeping out armies, would be equally effective at keeping out the cold. But the reality of castle life in winter is a paradox. The walls are thick, yes, but stone is a treacherous material. It does not hold heat like the mud and straw of the peasant cottage. Stone is conductive. It sucks the warmth out of the air. It pulls the heat from the human body. To lean against a castle wall in January is to feel the winter deep in your bones. The castle is a refrigerator of grand proportions. We enter the private sanctuary of the Lord and Lady. This room is known as the solar. It is usually situated on an upper floor far removed from the noise and the smells of the great hall below. It is a place of retreat, but in winter it is also a battleground. The enemy is the draft. The enemy is the chill that radiates from the very floor beneath your feet. The defense against this enemy begins with the fireplace. In the solar, the fire does not sit in the center of the room as it does in the cottage. It is contained within a massive stone hearth built into the wall. Above it, a great stone hood projects outward, designed to catch the smoke and funnel it up a chimney. This is a technological marvel of the age. It allows for a roaring fire without the blinding smoke that plagues the peasantry. The fire here is fed with seasoned logs of oak and ash wood that burns hot and slow. But a fire in a stone room creates a peculiar phenomenon. It roasts the side of you facing the hearth, while your back remains exposed to the stagnant, freezing air of the room. The heat struggles to circulate. To combat this, the walls themselves must be dressed. This is the true function of the tapestry. In our modern museums, we view tapestries as art. We admire the intricate weaving and the depictions of hunting scenes or biblical tales. But in the medieval solar, the tapestry is insulation. It is a survival tool. These heavy woolen hangings are suspended from hooks near the ceiling. They do not hang flush against the stone. They are hung with a gap of several inches between the fabric and the wall. This is intentional. It creates a pocket of dead air. The cold radiating from the stone is trapped in this air gap. The tapestry acts as a thermal barrier. If you sit quietly in the solar on a windy night, you can see the tapestries move. They sway gently, they billow and breathe. This is the wind forcing its way through the arrow slits and the masonry pushing the heavy wool inward. The tapestry catches the draft before it can reach the occupants. It is a ghost-like movement in the flickering firelight. The floor is not covered in loose straw, that is, for the hall below. Here the floor is paved with tiles or wide oak planks. It is covered with woven rush mats. These are thick and intricate, providing a layer of insulation for the feet. But even with mats the cold creeps up. The ultimate defense is the bed. The bed of a lord is not just a piece of furniture. It is a room within a room. It is a four-poster structure, massive and imposing. From the heavy wooden canopy, above thick curtains of velvet or heavy wool hang down on all four sides. When these curtains are drawn, the bed becomes a sealed box. The volume of air inside is small. The body heat of the sleepers warms this enclosed space rapidly. It is a private island of warmth. The mattress here is not stuffed with straw. It is a feather bed. It is a massive sack filled with goose down. Thousands of feathers harvested to create a surface that is not only soft but incredibly warm. The sleeper sinks into it. The feathers conform to the body, trapping heat effectively. On top of the sleeper lies the ultimate status symbol, furs. While the peasant relies on sheepskin, the lord covers himself with the skins of squirrels and martens. A coverlet lined with miniver, which is the white winter belly fur of the squirrel, is light but intensely warm. Sable and fox furs add weight and luxury. But the room is large, and the fire is far away. To create spots of heat elsewhere, the nobility uses braziers. These are iron baskets, on legs filled with glowing charcoal. Charcoal burns without smoke. It provides a clean, intense heat. These braziers can be moved around the room, placed near a chair or a writing desk. The smell of the charcoal mixing with the beeswax polish of the furniture is the scent of the solar. Yet even in this luxury, the cold is a constant companion. A page boy or a personal servant often sleeps in the room. He does not have a bed. He sleeps on a pallet at the foot of the lord's bed or even across the doorway. His presence is twofold. He is there to serve if the lord wakes and demands a drink, but he is also a source of heat. On the coldest nights, a servant might be asked to sleep closer just to add another body to the room. The immersive experience of the solar is one of hushed isolation. There is the gentle sway of the heavy tapestries in the draft. There is the echo of footsteps on the cold stone floors. There is the luxury of sinking into a deep, soft feather bed that seems to swallow you whole. There is the muted sound of the wind outside the thick castle walls, a distant roar that cannot quite touch you. Even with tapestries and furs, the bed needed preheating. This necessity led to ingenious inventions. To climb into a cold bed is a shock to the system. The linen sheets, which are smooth and refined, feel like ice against the skin. In a room where breath mists in the air, the transition from the fireside to the bed can be an ordeal. To mitigate this, the medieval household employs specific technologies. The most common tool is the warming pan. This is a round pan, usually made of brass or copper with a hinged lid. It is attached to a long wooden handle, often 3 or 4 feet in length. The process is a nightly ritual. A servant goes to the main fire and shovels glowing embers into the pan. They might add a few sprigs of lavender or chips of fruit wood, like apple or cherry. This is not just for the smell, though. The scent of toasted lavender is delightful. It is because the smoke from these woods is less acrid. The lid is closed and the latch secured. Then the servant takes the pan to the bed. They slide it between the sheets. They do not let it sit in one place. Copper conducts heat instantly. If the pan rests for even a moment, it will scorch the expensive linen sheets. A brown burn mark is a sign of a lazy servant. Instead, the pan is moved rapidly. It is swept up and down the length of the mattress in a constant motion. The metallic clink of the warming pan lid closing and the swish of the metal against the fabric are the sounds of bedtime. The heat transfers from the copper to the bedding. The moisture in the cold sheets is driven off. The bed is left toasty and dry. When the lord or lady slides their legs into the bed, they are met with a dry, enveloping heat. The smell of singed wool or hot linen is often associated with this comfort. It is a scent of safety. For those without a warming pan, or for additional heat, simpler methods are used. Stones, large smooth river stones, or soapstones, are placed in the hearth during the evening. They absorb the heat of the fire until they are too hot to touch. These stones are then wrapped in layers of flannel or thick wool cloth. They are placed at the foot of the bed, deep under the covers. They act as a thermal battery, releasing their heat slowly throughout the night. A brick heated in the oven can serve the same purpose. The radiating heat from a stone wrapped in flannel is a gentle, persistent warmth that keeps the toes alive. There is a more dangerous invention known as the bed wagon. This is a large wooden frame shaped like a cage. Inside the cage, suspended so it touches nothing, is a brazier of charcoal. The whole contraption is placed inside the bed under the blankets. The wooden frame holds the covers up, creating a tent. The heat from the charcoal fills the tent, warming the mattress and the air. It is effective, but risky. A spark can ignite the bedding. It requires constant vigilance. Sometimes the bed warmer is not a device, but a person. In the highest households, a young servant or a child might be ordered to get into the Lord's bed an hour before he retires. Their job is to lie there and use their own body heat to warm the mattress. When the Lord arrives, the servant scrambles out, leaving behind a pre-warmed nest. Later in history, ceramic bottles filled with hot water will appear. But for now, the element of fire is the primary tool. The hissing of a stray ember hitting the damp air as it is shoveled into the pan is a reminder of the raw energy being harnessed. This luxury was strictly for the upper classes. The peasants relied on their bodies and their beasts. But while the Lord slept warm in his feather bed, another group of people faced a nightly trial of endurance. We leave the castle and descend into the valley to the monastery. Here, life is governed not by the sun but by the bell. The monks follow the divine office, a schedule of prayer that cycles through the day and the night. The most grueling of these prayers is matins. It is the night office. It occurs roughly at 2 in the morning. This is the dead of night. It is the coldest hour when the frost is thickest and the human spirit is at its lowest ebb. The monks sleep in a large communal dormitory known as the dorter. It is a long stone hall located on the upper floor of the abbey buildings. Like the castle, it is unheated. The windows are often unglazed, open to the night air to ensure fresh ventilation. The temperature inside the dorter is often the same as the temperature outside. When the bell rings in the darkness, the monks must rise instantly. There is no lingering. There is no hitting a snooze button. But they have one advantage. They do not have to get dressed. Monks sleep in their habits. The heavy wool robe that they wear during the day is also their nightwear. They sleep fully clothed, often even wearing their shoes or sandals. This is partly for modesty, but largely for readiness. They throw off their thin blankets and stand on the cold floor. The immersive detail of this moment is sharp. The icy shock of stone floors on sandaled feet sends a jolt through the body. The shuffling of wool robes in the absolute silence is the only sound. Talking is strictly forbidden. The great silence is in effect from the last prayer of the evening until the first prayer of the morning. They file out of the dormitory. They do not go outside. They descend the night stairs. This is a staircase that connects the dormitory directly to the transept of the church. It allows them to access the choir without stepping into the weather. The church is a cavern of darkness. It is vast. The stone arches disappear into the gloom above. The only light comes from the few candles flickering in the choir stalls. The flickering candlelight casts long dancing shadows on the arches, making the statues of saints look like they are moving. The cold in the church is absolute. It is a damp, stationary cold that has settled in the stone for centuries. The monks take their places in the wooden stalls. They stand to chant. As they open their mouths to sing, the visible plumes of breath accompany the Gregorian chant. The air is so cold that the steam from their lungs creates a fog around the choir. They must turn the pages of the heavy parchment psalters with freezing fingers. Frostbite is a genuine risk. Monks suffer from chilblains, painful inflammation of the fingers and toes caused by the cold. Staying awake is a struggle. The body wants to sleep. The rhythmic chanting is hypnotic. The darkness is heavy. But sleeping in the choir is a serious offense. A monitor often circulates with a lantern, gently waking those who nod off. There is only one place in the entire monastery that is heated, the calefactory. This is the warming room. It has a fire. Monks are allowed to go there for brief periods to thaw their frozen ink for writing or to warm their hands before returning to their duties. But the dormitory and the church remain cold. This existence creates a specific emotional tone. It is reverent, it is somber, but it is also chillingly peaceful. The struggle against the cold is seen as a spiritual discipline. It is a way of subduing the flesh. The struggle to keep eyes open in the freezing dark is an offering to God. From the silence of the cloister, we move to the crowded floor of the great hall where the rest of the household sleeps. Back in the castle or the manor house, not everyone has a solar. The vast majority of the household staff, the servants, the grooms, the kitchen hands, do not have private rooms. They do not even have a dormitory. They sleep in the place where they work, the great hall. During the day, this is the center of activity. It is where meals are eaten, where courts are held, and where guests are entertained. But at night, the tables are cleared away or pushed to the walls. The hall transforms into a campsite. The servants sleep on pallets, which are simple mattresses of straw encased in canvas, or they sleep on the wooden benches that line the tables. Some simply curl up in the rushes on the floor, wrapping themselves in their cloaks. Their bedding is their livery. The heavy wool cloaks they wear during the day become their blankets at night. They lie huddled together, much like the peasants in their cottages. But they have one great advantage, the central hearth. The great hall is heated by a massive fire in the center or a large fireplace in the wall. Although the fire is allowed to die down at night, the embers remain. A pile of logs the size of tree trunks can hold heat for hours. The servants arrange themselves around this heat source. It is like a solar system of sleep. The highest-ranking servants sleep closest to the warmth. The lower servants are further out in the shadows. The hall is drafty. The great oak doors are rarely airtight. A draft sweeps under the door, constantly chilling the floor. The servants learn to sleep with their heads covered, pulling their cloaks tight. They are not alone. The dogs of the castle sleep here too. The hunting hounds, the terriers, and the guard dogs wander the hall or curl up near the fire. A servant who is friendly with the dogs might find himself with a warm living blanket. The warmth of a hunting dog resting against a leg is a prized comfort. Security is part of the sleeping arrangement. The marshal of the hall is an officer responsible for order. He ensures the lights are out and the fire is safe. Some servants are assigned to sleep across the doorways. They are human barricades. If anyone tries to enter or leave during the night, they must step over the sleeping servant. The straw on the hall floor is changed much less frequently than in the solar. It is mixed with the debris of the day, bones from dinner, droppings from the dogs. It is an earthy, gritty environment. But there is a sense of camaraderie here. It is safe. They are surrounded by their peers. The muffled sounds of the castle settling for the night, the shifting of the logs, the snore of a companion create a soundscape of shared rest. The dying orange light of the massive log fire casts a warm glow over the scene, turning the rough wool cloaks into a sea of soft shapes. The hall is the last place to go quiet as the servants finish their tasks, and it is the first place to wake up as the fire must be stoked for the morning meal. And so, from the smoke-filled cottage of the plowman to the velvet-draped solar of the lord, the medieval world finds its rest. The fire has burned down to a soft, pulsing glow. The drafts are held at bay by stone and wool. The silence of the winter night wraps around the land like a heavy blanket. We leave them there, safe in their islands of warmth, drifting into the deep, restorative sleep of history. Rest well, travelers. We drift now away from the specific stories of knights and peasants. We leave the castle hall with its roaring hearth and the thatched cottage with its smoky rafters behind. Instead, we turn our minds to the quiet, underlying rhythm of the night itself. We enter a space of pure observation, a library of shadows and silence. Here, amidst the stillness, we shall explore the biology of the cold and the forgotten architecture of sleep in a time before the relentless glare of electric light. It is a journey into the science of rest, a study of how the human body once moved in perfect harmony with the turning of the winter world. So let your own body settle into the cushions. Let your limbs become heavy and loose. We are about to understand, deeply and truly, why the winter night was the deepest ocean of sleep in all of human history. Consider, for a moment, the temperature of the air that surrounds you. In the modern world, we are constantly fighting against the cold. We view it as an intruder. We turn up thermostats to tropical levels, and we seal our triple-glazed windows tight against the draft. But the human body has a different wisdom, an ancient preference written into our very DNA. There is a specific thermal sweet spot for the human animal to find its absolute deepest rest. Science tells us this ideal temperature is roughly 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 18 degrees Celsius. It is cooler than we might expect. It is not warm. It is a crisp and refreshing coolness that signals to the brain that the day is done. In the medieval home, this temperature was not a setting on a plastic dial that one could adjust. It was the natural, inescapable state of the sleeping chamber. As the fire died down in the central hearth, the room would slowly, inevitably cool. The stone walls would radiate the chill of the earth. This was not a failure of comfort, nor was it a hardship to be endured. It was a biological invitation. It was the world whispering to the body that it was time to shut down. When the air in the room drops, it triggers a profound and complex chemical shift within us. The core body temperature begins to fall, shedding the heat of the day's labor. This drop is the master switch for our circadian rhythm. It is the silent signal for the pineal gland, deep within the brain, to release melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone of darkness, the chemical sunset of the body. In our heated modern bedrooms, we often confuse this delicate system. We stay too warm, and so our bodies remain half alert, waiting for a cooling that never comes. But the medieval sleeper, tucked away in their unheated loft, experienced a perfect, gradual descent. The cold air washed over their face while their body remained hidden, creating a perfect physiological slide into slumber. Think of the sensation of the bedding itself. To sleep in a cold room requires a different kind of architecture for the bed. You must pile on the wool blankets, layer upon layer of heavy, scratchy warmth. You sink under the immense weight of a down feather bed, a mattress stuffed with the softest goose feathers. This creates a microenvironment, a personal ecosystem. It is a small pocket of perfect warmth and humidity, trapped between the dense mattress and the thick quilt. The weight itself is therapeutic. We know today that deep pressure stimulation calms the nervous system, reducing cortisol and anxiety. The heavy wool of the past acted like a primitive weighted blanket. It held the sleeper down, anchoring them to the earth. It provided a sense of security and containment, like a hug that lasted all night. The body is warm, toasted by its own heat, but the head remains cool, exposed to the fresh winter air. This contrast is vital. The sensation of cold air on the forehead, the nose, and the cheeks stimulates the vagus nerve. This is the longest and most complex nerve of the autonomic nervous system. It wanders like a river from the brain stem down to the heart, the lungs, and the gut. When the face is cooled, even slightly, the vagus nerve sends a powerful message to the heart. It tells it to slow down. It deepens the breath, making the exhalations longer and smoother. It tells the body that it is safe to power down, to conserve, to rest. It triggers the mammalian dive reflex. This is an ancient evolutionary echo, a memory from when we were aquatic creatures. It is a state of suspended animation, where metabolism slows and oxygen consumption drops. In the deep winter, surrounded by the frost, the medieval sleeper entered a state very close to hibernation. We still carry this instinct within us. It is vestigial, buried under layers of modernity, but it is present. When the days shorten and the snow falls, our bodies want to slow down. We feel a natural, pleasant lethargy. In the Middle Ages, this was not fought with caffeine or artificial bright lights. It was accepted. It was welcomed. It was called wintering. The metabolism slows significantly during the winter months. The body tries to conserve energy, burning the candles slowly. It prepares for a time of scarcity by reducing its demands. This biological slowing down allowed for a quality of sleep that is rare today. It was a dense, heavy, and restorative slumber, a sleep that knitted the bones and cleared the mind. The air quality played a subtle role as well. In a small, enclosed sleeping space, perhaps a box bed with sliding doors, or a bed surrounded by thick velvet curtains, The levels of carbon dioxide would rise slightly through the night. While too much is dangerous, a slight increase in a ventilated room can induce a feeling of heavy drowsiness. It deepens the breathing cycle. It acts as a mild, natural sedative. The sleeper was tucked away in a cocoon, separated from the vastness of the room. The darkness was absolute. There was no light pollution. No street lamps cast an orange, sodium glow through the wooden shutters. No LED diodes blinked their red or green eyes from devices on a nightstand. The darkness was heavy, velvety, and complete. It was a physical substance. This allowed for perfect circadian alignment. The body knew exactly when it was night. The production of melatonin was robust and uninterrupted. The sleep of the winter was a total surrender to biology. It was a symbiotic relationship between the frozen, silent world outside and the warm, slow pulse within. This deep biological rhythm led to a phenomenon almost lost to the modern world, a pattern of rest that has been forgotten by the history books until recently. It is the lost pattern of segmented sleep. We tend to think of a good night's sleep as a single, unbroken block. We aim for 8 hours of continuous unconsciousness. If we wake up in the middle of the night, we worry. We check the clock. We call it insomnia. We become anxious that we are failing at sleep. But for most of human history, this 8-hour block did not exist. It is a modern invention, born of the factory whistle and electric lighting. In the medieval winter, the night lasted for 14 hours. It was simply too long to sleep through in one continuous event. The human bladder, the human stomach, and the human back could not sustain it. Instead, the human body fell into a biphasic pattern. It was asleep in 2 distinct acts. Historians, most notably Roger Eckertz, have uncovered this lost rhythm through meticulous research. It was universal. It appeared in diaries, in medical texts, in court records, and in literature. They called the first block of rest the first sleep, or sometimes dead sleep. This began shortly after dusk, perhaps around 9 o'clock. The exhausted body, worn out from physical labor in the cold, would collapse into a profound slumber. It was a deep and dreamless state, a coma of restoration. It allowed the body to repair muscle tissue and restore glycogen. This first sleep would last until around midnight, or perhaps 1 in the morning, and then the sleeper would wake up. This was not a groggy, confused, or accidental waking. It was a natural surfacing, like a diver coming up for air. It was a period known as the watch in France. It was called the dorveil. This translates beautifully as the wake sleep. It was a liminal time, a threshold state. It was a bridge between the worlds of the unconscious and the conscious. The sleeper would stir. They would feel fully awake but deeply relaxed, their muscles loose, their mind calm. The brain was still bathed in prolactin and melatonin. It was a state of crystal clear tranquility, a meditative awareness that is hard to achieve in the daylight. The house was dark and quiet. This hour of the watch was a time of immense peace. It lasted perhaps an hour or more. What did people do in this dark interval? They stayed in bed. They pulled the furs up to their chins and listened to the silence. It was a time for reflection. In the bustle of the day, in the fields or the workshop, there was no privacy. But in the dorveil, the world belonged to you alone. People would pray, reciting the Psalms in a whisper. They would meditate on the day that had passed, sorting through their memories. It was also a time of profound intimacy. Spouses would talk quietly in the dark. The bed was a private island. In a house crowded with children, servants, and even livestock on the ground floor, the middle of the night was the only time for secrets. The darkness made it easier to speak of difficult things, of hopes and fears. Whispers carried softly in the cold air, creating a bond that daylight could not forge. Physicians of the time believed this waking period was essential for health. They taught that digestion was completed during the first sleep. The body needed to wake up, to settle itself, to turn over, to adjust the humors before beginning the next phase. It was seen as a biological necessity. There was no stigma attached to waking up. There was no anxiety. A person would lie there and simply be. They watched the embers of the fire glow red in the hearth, fading slowly to gray. They listened to the wind rattling the latch. They existed in a state of calm awareness, watching the night pass. Eventually, the eyelids would grow heavy again. The body temperature, which had risen slightly during the watch, would begin to drop once more. The second wave of sleep would wash over them, gentle as a tide. This was called the second sleep, or the morning sleep. It lasted until dawn. This second phase was different in quality. It was lighter. It was the time of REM sleep. This is where dreams happen. Because the sleeper had already rested deeply during the first sleep, the mind was free to wander. The dreams of the second sleep were said to be incredibly vivid. They were narrative, complex, and emotional. They were thought to be messages from the divine or the subconscious. The long winter night provided a private theater for the mind, a place where the imagination could run wild. Think of the luxury of this, to wake up and know you have hours left to rest, to drift in and out of consciousness without guilt. The winter night was a vast landscape of time. It was not a schedule to be kept. It was a tide to be ridden. The waking hour was not an interruption. It was the centerpiece of the night. It was a time to check the fire and perhaps add a log. It was a time to reassure oneself of the safety of the home. During this waking hour, the world outside was characterized by a profound silence. We must pause to imagine the soundscape of the medieval winter. Our modern world is never truly silent. There is always a hum. We hear the distant roar of a highway. We hear the buzz of a refrigerator. We hear the drone of an airplane high above the clouds. We are bathed in white noise, a constant sonic clutter. We have forgotten what true silence feels like. But the medieval winter was a place of acoustic purity. When snow falls, it changes the physics of sound. Snow is a porous material. It is complex and filled with trapped air. This makes it an incredible acoustic absorber. It dampens sound waves, catching them in its crystal lattice. It acts like the foam padding in a recording studio. A landscape covered in deep snow is technically quieter than a summer field. The background noise is scrubbed away. The world feels muffled, soft, and close. In this woolly silence, specific sounds became incredibly distinct. The cold air played a trick on the ears. Cold air is denser than warm air. It has a higher refractive index for sound waves. This means that sound carries further and clearer in the winter. A sound that might be lost in the summer wind can travel for miles over the frozen ground. The primary timekeeper of the night was the church bell. In the deep silence, the tolling of the bell was a physical event. It rippled through the air, clear and melancholic. A farmer, lying in his bed miles from the village, could hear the bell marking the canonical hours, matins and lauds. It was a lonely and beautiful sound. It was a reminder that someone was awake, someone was watching. It connected the isolated sleeper to the community of souls, a sonic thread tying the parish together. The natural world had its own voice, sharp and violent. In the extreme cold, the trees themselves would speak. The sap inside the wood freezes and expands. This causes the bark and timber to split with a sudden, sharp crack. These are called frostquakes. In the dead of night, a loud report would echo from the forest like a pistol shot. It was the sound of the trees shivering. The timber frames of the house would groan. As the temperature dropped, the green oak beams contracted. The house settled on its foundations. These creaks and groans were the lullaby of the structure, the house adjusting its bones against the cold. Then there were the animals. In medieval England and across Europe, the wolf was a real and present danger. The howl of a wolf pack carries for miles in the clear winter air. In the winter, famished and bold, they would come closer to the villages looking for food. The sound of a howl, rising and falling in the distance, was a primal signal. It tapped into a deep, instinctual fear. It made the warmth of the bed feel even sweeter, even safer. It was the sound of the wild pressing against the fragile walls of civilization. Owls were the sentinels of the dark. The tawny owl and the barn owl were active in the winter. Their calls were haunting. The screech of a barn owl is not a gentle sound. It is a piercing shriek that cuts through the night. Folklore often associated these night birds with the supernatural. To hear an owl hooting on the roof was an omen. It was a voice from the spirit world watching the house. But mostly there was silence. It was not an empty silence. It was a heavy and present silence. It felt like a weight pressing against the ears. It was the sound of the earth sleeping. In a world without engines, the silence was vast. It stretched from the doorstep to the horizon. It allowed the mind to expand. In this silence, the imagination took flight, weaving stories of the long night to explain the darkness. This brings us to the stories they told themselves, the folklore of the frozen dark. When the world is this quiet and this dark, the human mind fills the void with meaning. The winter night was not just a meteorological event. It was a spiritual landscape. It was populated by beings that only came out when the sun retreated. The most famous of these myths was the wild hunt across northern Europe. People believed that on the stormiest winter nights, a ghostly procession rode across the sky. They were led by Odin or Woden, or perhaps a mythical king like Herla. They rode on skeletal horses with eyes of fire. They were accompanied by baying hounds that ran on the clouds. The sound of the winter wind howling around the eaves, tearing at the thatch, was interpreted as the passing of the hunt. To see them was an omen of doom. To hear them was a warning to stay indoors. This myth gave a face to the violence of the winter storm. It made the chaos of the wind understandable, turning weather into a story. The winter solstice was a time when the veil between worlds was thin. Spirits were believed to be more active during the longest nights. The darkness was their element. Figures like Jack Frost were not just cartoon characters in nursery rhymes. They were elemental spirits of the cold, capricious, and dangerous. When a person woke with numbness in their toes or fingers, it was said that the frost sprite had nipped them. To protect against these entities, the bedroom became a fortress of rituals. The Yule log was burned not just for heat, but for banishment. It was believed that the light of the special oak log would drive away the shadows. The ashes of the Yule log were deemed sacred. They were kept under the bed to protect against lightning and fire in the coming year. There were smaller dangers, too. Drafts of cold air were suspicious. If a sudden cold spot appeared in the room, it might be a goblin or a sprite seeking warmth. People placed protective charms by the bed to ward them off. Iron was considered a holy metal that spirits could not touch. A pair of iron tongs or a knife placed under the mattress was a shield. Salt, the preserver, was sprinkled on the threshold to stop entities from entering. Sleep paralysis was a well-known phenomenon, though not understood scientifically. We understand it now as a disconnect between the brain and the muscles during REM sleep. But to the medieval mind, it was the nightmare. This was a specific demon, often depicted as a hag, that sat on the sleeper's chest. It crushed the breath out of them. It rendered them unable to move or scream. The word nightmare comes from this very belief. It was a terrifying intrusion of the supernatural into the safety of the bed. Yet there was also magic in the winter sleep. It was believed that dreams dreamed on the solstice had the power of prophecy. The second sleep was a time of divination. If a young woman put a sprig of holly under her pillow, she might dream of her future husband. The winter night was a time when the future was written in the stars and in the mind. Fairies were thought to be drawn to the human hearth. On cold nights, a family might leave a bowl of cream or a piece of bread by the fire. This was an offering. It was a bribe to the little folk to come inside and warm themselves and perhaps do a few chores while the family slept. It was a way of sharing the precious warmth of the home with the unseen world, a treaty of peace with the spirits of the land. The darkness was alive. It was a canvas for fear and wonder. The flickering firelight threw shadows against the walls. A hanging cloak could look like a looming figure. The wind in the chimney sounded like whispering voices. But the sleeper was safe. They were tucked into the center of the house. They were guarded by iron and fire and prayer. The folklore added a layer of richness to the experience of sleep. It made the bed feel like a sanctuary in a magical war. But eventually, the night must end. The long, slow transition to morning begins. The medieval waking was not a sudden event. It was a gradual return to the world. There were no alarm clocks to shatter the silence. There were no digital numbers glowing in the dark to induce panic. The timing of the wake-up was dictated by the light, or rather, by the animals. The rooster is the original alarm. His crowing is triggered by the first subtle shift in light, long before the human eye can detect the dawn. The rooster calls, and the village begins to stir. The transition from the warm bed to the cold room was the first challenge of the day. The air in the room would be freezing, the fire long dead. Often, the water in the washbowl would have a thick layer of ice on it. The sleeper had to break the ice with their knuckles to splash their face. It was a shock to the system. It closed the door on the dream world and snapped the mind into the present. It was a baptism of cold to start the day. The first task was always the fire. The embers from the night before had been banked. They were covered in ash to keep a small heart of heat alive. This was called the seed of the fire. The person waking up would gently uncover the glow. They would blow softly on the coals, coaxing them back to life. They would feed it with dry kindling and straw. The smell of wood smoke was the incense of the morning. It signaled that life was returning to the house, that warmth was conquering the cold once again. Breakfast was not a heavy meal. It was often just a morning sop. This was a piece of coarse bread dipped in ale, or perhaps a little warm broth. It was just enough to fuel the body for the morning chores. The stomach was warmed. The blood began to flow. The livestock had to be checked immediately. The animals were the lifeblood of the family. The farmer would go out into the gray light to break the ice on the water troughs. He would throw hay to the cattle. The heat from the animals' bodies filled the barn with steam. There was a camaraderie in the morning chores. Man and beast had both survived another night of cold. The visual beauty of a winter morning was a reward in itself. The world was transformed. The trees were coated in hoarfrost. Every twig and branch was outlined in white crystal. It looked like a forest made of silver and lace. The sun rose late and low. It hugged the horizon. It was a red and swollen disk that cast long blue shadows across the snow. The light was soft and forgiving, bathing the world in a pastel glow. The village came alive slowly. Chimney by chimney, the smoke began to rise. It formed vertical columns in the still air. Doors opened and neighbors greeted each other. There was a sense of shared victory. The night had been long and dark, but the sun had returned. The cycle continued. There was a gratitude in this waking. In a world where life was fragile, surviving the winter was not guaranteed. Every morning was a small resurrection. The body felt rested. The mind had traveled through the darkness and returned. The work of the day waited, but there was no rush. The pace of winter was slow. The day was short. There was only so much that could be done before the darkness returned. And so the medieval person moved with a deliberate calmness. They carried the silence of the night into the day. We now gently close the book on the scholarly reflection. The night has passed, the facts have been gathered, and the history books are closed. We have walked through the science of sleep and the folklore of the frost. The mind is full of quiet knowledge, resting gently like snow upon a field. There is no more to learn tonight. There are no more dates to remember, no more names to recall. The information settles into the background. It becomes part of the landscape of your rest. You understand now that your desire to sleep is ancient. It is supported by the biology of your cells and the history of your ancestors. You are part of a long line of sleepers who have sought comfort in the dark. The cold air is a friend. The heavy blanket is a shield. The silence is a canvas. You are safe in your own winter sanctuary. The world outside can wait. The sun will rise in its own time. But for now, the night is yours. There is no more to do. There is only the steady rhythm of your breathing. There is only the slow beat of your heart. You are drifting on the currents of time. You are floating in the vast, peaceful ocean of the long night. We have reached the quietest hour. The lessons are finished. The history books are closed and placed upon the shelf. The candles have been snuffed out one by one, leaving trails of white smoke to drift and dissolve in the air. Now there is nothing left to do but to observe. There is no plot to follow. There is no conflict to resolve. There is only the vast, breathing stillness of the winter world. We are going to step into a series of living paintings. We will drift through them like ghosts, observing the peace of the past without disturbing a single grain of dust. Let your mind become a blank canvas. Let the images I describe paint themselves slowly behind your closed eyelids. This is the winter dreamscape. We begin our journey in the high hills, far from the villages and the towns. We find ourselves in the solitary world of the shepherd. It is deep night. The air here is thin and incredibly cold. Sharp as a knife, yet clean and pure. On the side of a rolling chalk hill sits a small wooden structure. It is a shepherd's hut. It rests on iron wheels, allowing it to be moved with the flock. But tonight, the wheels are sunken deep into the frozen mud. The hut is anchored. It is a tiny island of life in a sea of darkness. Inside this small wooden box, the world is warm and close. The air smells of lanolin and unwashed wool, of dry hay and wood smoke. The shepherd sits on a low bench. He is wrapped in a heavy cloak made of rough gray wool. He does not move. He does not speak. He is simply watching. Through the small, open hatch of the hut, he looks out at his charges. The sheep are huddled together in a fold made of hurdles. They are a singular mass of warmth. Their fleeces are thick and oily, designed by nature to repel the frost. They press against one another, sharing their body heat, creating a collective breath that rises like a low mist above the pen. The shepherd watches them. He listens to the rhythmic sound of their chewing. It is a slow, grinding sound, steady and repetitive. It is the sound of contentment. Occasionally, a sheep will shift its weight, or let out a soft, muffled bleat that is swallowed instantly by the vastness of the night. But mostly, they are still. The shepherd breaks his fast with a simple meal. He holds a piece of hard yellow cheese in one hand and a crust of dark rye bread in the other. He eats slowly. He chews with the same steady rhythm as his flock. There is no rush. Time behaves differently here in the hills. It does not tick in seconds or minutes. It moves in the slow arc of the stars. He looks up. The sky above is a masterpiece of the winter. Without the interference of city lights, the heavens are crowded with stars. They hang low and heavy, looking like diamonds scattered on black velvet. He sees the hunter, Orion, striding across the southern horizon, his belt of 3 bright stars glowing fiercely. He sees the plow turning slowly around the North Star. He knows these stars as well as he knows his sheep. They are his clock and his calendar. They tell him how deep the night is. They tell him that dawn is still hours away. At his feet lies his dog. The animal is curled into a tight circle, nose tucked under tail. The dog sleeps, but one ear twitches occasionally. It is a sleep of readiness, but for now, there is no danger. There are no wolves tonight. There is only the silence. A lantern hangs from a hook on the wall of the hut. The flame is turned low to save oil. It casts a small, trembling circle of orange light. It illuminates the shepherd's weathered hands and the rough grain of the wooden walls. Outside the circle of light, the world fades into a deep, impenetrable blue. The frost is beginning to form. It settles on the wooden wheels of the hut. It sparkles on the wool of the sheep. It coats the stiff blades of grass on the hillside. The world is being encased in crystal. The shepherd pulls his cloak tighter. He is not lonely. He is connected to the land. He is a part of the hill, a part of the flock, a part of the sky. He closes his eyes for a moment, listening to the wind singing softly through the gaps in the wood. He is safe. The flock is safe. The night is long, and peace reigns in the high country. We leave the shepherd now, fading away from the hillside, drifting down through the valleys, moving towards a warmer light. We find ourselves in the great hall of a manor house. The room is vast and shadowed, the ceiling lost in the gloom of the rafters. But at one end of the hall there is a cave of light. It is the hearth, and in the hearth burns the Yule log. This is not a simple piece of firewood. It is an entire tree trunk. It is a massive oak, dragged from the forest by horses, blessed with wine and grain, and rolled into the cavernous fireplace. It is the heart of the midwinter celebration. It is meant to burn for the 12 full days of Christmas. We are watching it in the dead of night, when the household has gone to sleep, and only the fire remains awake. Watch the flames. They are hypnotic. They dance and sway in a silent rhythm. The fire has settled into a steady, consuming burn. The bark of the great oak is thick and rugged, like the skin of an ancient elephant. It glows with a deep, pulsating red. As the heat penetrates the wood, the sap begins to boil. It hisses and bubbles, escaping from the cracks in the bark. It smells of the forest. It releases the scent of summers past, the smell of sun-warmed leaves, of damp earth, of rain. The memory of the tree is being released into the room as heat and light. The colors of the fire change moment by moment. At the base, where the heat is most intense, the flame is transparent, a ghost of blue. Higher up, it turns to a rich, vibrant orange. At the very tips, where the flame licks at the darkness of the chimney, it is a pale, flickering yellow. Sparks rise up occasionally. They spiral upwards like fireflies, disappearing into the soot-blackened throat of the chimney, rising to join the stars outside. The log is consumed slowly. It is a study in patience. Inch by inch, the wood turns to charcoal. The charcoal glows with an intense, steady heat. It radiates outwards, warming the stone flagstones of the floor. If you were to stand there, you would feel the heat washing over your face, flushing your skin, making your eyelids heavy. It is a drowsy, narcotic heat. It presses against you, urging you to lie down, to curl up on the thick rugs before the fire. The ash accumulates beneath the grate. It is soft and gray, piling up like drifts of dirty snow. It is the ghost of the wood. The shadows in the room dance in time with the flames. They lengthen and shorten on the stone walls. They play tricks on the eyes. The heavy beams of the ceiling seem to move, to breathe, but it is just the light. The room is perfectly still. There is no sound but the soft crackle of the wood and the gentle roar of the draft. This fire is a companion. It has been burning for days, and it will burn for days more. It is a symbol of endurance. It pushes back the cold and the dark. It is a sun brought indoors. To gaze into it, the eyes lose focus, the mind empties of thought. There is only the orange glow, the shifting patterns of the heat, the comfort of the hearth. You are watching time itself burn, slowly, beautifully, turning into warmth and light. The warmth fades gently as we turn away from the fire. We float through the heavy oak doors, passing through the wood like mist. We step out into the village street. The air strikes us immediately. It is cold, silent, and still. It is snowing. This is not a blizzard. It is a gentle, steady snowfall. The flakes are large and soft, like goose down. They fall straight down from a sky that is the color of iron. There is no wind to scatter them. They drift lazily, taking their time to reach the earth. We are walking through the village, but our feet make no sound. We are observers of the stillness. Look at the cottages. The thatched roofs are covered in a thick, perfect blanket of white. The snow rounds the sharp edges of the architecture. It turns the village into a collection of soft, white mounds. The chimneys are capped with snow, with only thin ribbons of gray smoke rising straight up into the still air, marking the warmth of the families sleeping inside. The windows are dark. Everyone is asleep. We are the only consciousness moving through this white world. The street is empty. Any footprints made during the day have long since been filled in. The surface of the snow is pristine, unbroken, sparkling faintly in the ambient light. It muffles everything. The usual sounds of the village, the cartwheels, the voices, the barking dogs, are gone. But even the natural sounds are dampened. The snow absorbs the noise. The silence is profound. It is a heavy, physical silence that wraps around the houses like cotton wool. We pass the village church. The stone tower rises up, disappearing into the gray darkness of the sky. The gargoyles on the eaves wear caps of snow. The graveyard is a field of white, the headstones mere bumps in the drift. It is a scene of absolute peace. The dead sleep under a double blanket of earth and snow. We walk towards the river. The water is frozen at the edges, black and sleek in the center. The ice creeps inward, forming jagged patterns of white against the dark current. The sound of the water is muted, a low murmur under the ice. On the branch of a willow tree, a bird sits, fluffing its feathers. It is a small round ball of life, waiting for the morning. It does not move as we pass. The trees stand like skeletons. Their bare branches are coated in frost and snow, outlining every twig against the dark sky. They look like intricate lace. They do not sway. They stand in suspended animation, waiting for the spring that is months away. But there is no impatience in them. They know how to wait. The light is strange here. It is night, yet the snow reflects the moon and the starlight, creating a luminous blue-gray glow. It is bright enough to see, but it is a soft, shadowless light. It feels dreamlike. It feels as if the village has been enchanted, frozen in time, preserved in a layer of white sugar. The cold tingles in the nose, but it is not biting. It is a fresh, clean cold. It smells of ice and ozone. It clears the mind. It washes away the clutter of thoughts. There is only the snow, falling and falling and falling. As we stand in the falling snow, the physical world begins to blur. We drift further, deeper into the abstract. We enter the dreamscape of the past. This is not a place of brick and mortar, but a place of memory and rest. We are floating through the collective slumber of history. Imagine the tools of the harvest laid down for the winter, the scythes, the plows, the rakes. They are stored in the barns, resting against the wooden walls. They are cold and still. They have done their work. They wait in the darkness, their metal blades dull and sleeping. The fields outside are fallow. The earth itself is sleeping. The furrows are hard with frost, the seeds hidden deep underground, curled tight in their shells, dreaming of the green shoot. The land is taking a long, slow breath in. It is the inhale of the winter. Imagine the archives, the chests of oak in the monasteries and the castles. Inside, the parchment scrolls and the leather-bound books lie in darkness. The ink is dry. The words are silent. The history they contain is sleeping. The stories of battles and kings, of lovers and saints, are all resting between the pages. Dust motes dance in the shafts of moonlight that pierce the library windows, settling slowly on the covers. The smell is of old paper and dry herbs, a scent of preservation. We drift over the sleeping ancestors. We feel the weight of the generations that have gone before. They are not gone. They are simply resting. They are the roots of the tree. The winter night connects the living and the dead in a shared silence. The stone walls of the houses hold the memories of the people who built them. The wood of the beams remembers the forest. Everything has a memory. Everything has a soul that sleeps in the winter. The seasons are a wheel. We are at the bottom of the turning. It is the pause between the exhale and the inhale. It is the stillness at the center of the spinning world. Time stretches out. A minute feels like an hour. An hour feels like a century. We are floating in a timeless void, held safe by the dark. The boundaries of the physical world soften. The sharp edges of reality blur. We are drifting on a river of time, moving slowly towards the ocean of sleep. The wind whispers around the corners of the world. It tells stories in a language we almost understand. It speaks of patience. It speaks of the necessity of rest. It tells us that to sleep is to participate in the great cycle of the universe. The stars wheel overhead, marking the passage of eons. We are small. We are safe. We are part of the great sleeping hole. And now we descend. We float down from the abstract, down from the sky, down from the history. We return to the intimate. We return to the room. We return to you. We are back at the hearth, but hours have passed. The Yule log has burned down. It is no longer a roaring fire. It is a bed of glowing coals. The flames have died away, leaving only a deep, pulsing red light. The heat has softened. It is a gentle warmth now, a fading memory of the fire. The shadows in the room have stopped dancing. They have settled into the corners, wrapping the room in a soft, gray twilight. The room is cooling. You can feel the air changing. It is fresh and still. You are in bed. You are buried under the heavy wool blankets. You are sinking into the mattress. The weight of the covers is a comfort. It presses you down, anchoring you to the sleep that waits. You feel the heavy linen against your skin. You feel the softness of the pillow beneath your head. Listen to your own breathing. It has slowed down. It matches the rhythm of the dying fire. Inhale, exhale. It is the only sound in the world. The house is silent. The timbers have finished their settling. The mice are asleep in the walls. The world outside is buried in snow. There is nothing moving. There is nothing that needs to be done. You are safe. The doors are barred. The shutters are closed. The iron is by the bed. The salt is on the threshold. The spirits of the winter are outside, and you are inside. You are in the warm heart of the sanctuary. The darkness is not empty. It is a blanket. It covers you, protects you, hides you from the world. Your eyelids are heavy. They feel like they are made of lead. It is a struggle to keep them open. And why would you? There is nothing to see. The fire is just a small red eye in the dark, blinking slowly, getting dimmer and dimmer. The red turns to gray. The light fades. The darkness creeps in from the edges of the room, soft and welcoming. You let go of the tension in your body. You unclench your jaw. You drop your shoulders. You uncurl your hands. You let your legs become heavy logs. You are melting into the bed. You are drifting down, down, down. The thoughts in your mind are becoming slippery. They slide away before you can catch them. They turn into dreams. The logic of the day dissolves. The winter dreamscape takes over. There is only the warmth. There is only the dark. There is only the silence. The final ember glows one last time, a tiny spark of life, and then it fades. The room is dark. The story is done. The fire has dimmed to a single glowing coal, and the world outside has vanished into the quiet embrace of the snow. You are safe. You are warm. And you are part of this timeless story of rest. Thank you for joining me, the sleeping scribe, on this journey into the long night. If you are still with me, let the darkness cover you like a soft wool blanket. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift away. Good night, sleep well, and until next time.